people get mad as heck about this. I'm talking about pissed. The MCU Spider-Man, people like him, and then people don't like him. And people that don't like him, they say that he's like Iron Boy. He's not Spider-Man. But it all really stems from the fact that, there is a character that we know of called Spider-Man, and this character has had stories told in the comics, and people really respect and love the character because of those stories told. And they feel like the stories that are being told by Disney, by Marvel, it ain't really Spider-Man. It's not that Spider-Man that we know from the comics. Some people feel like that. But in reality, I think it's largely based around or centered around the idea or notion that, like, this is different. This is different. Why is Peter looking up to Iron Man? Peter Parker is Spider-Man, and he's my favorite superhero. He shouldn't be looking up to some other superhero. Like, that's not at all. I don't like that at all. But I think, for one thing, I think people, they don't really like difference. They don't like new things. People are used to being comfortable and familiar, and oh my gosh, this is the story that I know. And yeah, it's kind of, I think the MCU, they told a different story, but I think the point of them telling this story with Spider-Man, with Peter Parker, the way that they told it is, number one, because they are ultimately like mirroring the audience. So Peter Parker, Spider-Man is one of the most relatable like superheroes. A lot of people see themselves in Peter Parker, see themselves in Spider-Man. So I think Marvel's approach to that was to directly create a kid who like looks up to a superhero, as we as fans were kids that looked up to superheroes, looked up to Spider-Man. Spider-Man looked up to Iron Man. The point was, I think, to have that mirroring image of us as Spider-Man. I think that was number one where they were trying to go. Number two, I think that ultimately they wanted to create Spider-Man. Like, Peter Parker is a kid. He's a person that goes through things, has his own experiences that shape who he is. And I think they wanted to do that with each film. They were going to get us closer and closer to that Spider-Man that we know of, but he wasn't going to start that. They want to tell a story in which it builds upon itself. Like it builds. We get there. The whole movie is about his spider sense, and the fact that they don't call it spider sense because they don't need to, because we as the audience understand what that is, and he doesn't need to call it spider sense right now. But I think ultimately the point was for him to become Spider-Man. The first film, it's him realizing, I don't need to be an Avenger, and then the second film is realizing, I am capable. I am capable, and I think that the third film, they're going to continue that. They're going to continue the pressing onto the Spider-Man character. And that's why I really liked Far From Home, because I felt like this is the most comic accurate portrayal of Peter Parker. Why? Because Peter Parker is a kid with his own problems, with a whole bunch of stuff going on. Like, and I think that because of the unfamiliarity of the story being told, because of it being Spider-Man, and Spider-Man looks up to Tony Stark, even though in the comics he did. He looked up to Tony Stark, but then during Civil War, he said, you know what? Forget you. Like, But this isn't anything that is odd. It's just the fact that people have their own, like, understanding of the character. And when things were made differently, people get a little bit, no. But I think ultimately, like, when they continue, because the thing is, you're probably going like, wait a minute, Venom, what do you mean in the third one? Spider-Man's not in the MCU. First of all, we don't know. Second, even if he's not in the MCU, they're going to continue the story, and they're going to make Peter Parker the Spider-Man that we know him to be. And I think that's actually really interesting. Instead of him being, I'm Spider-Man, we get him to that point in which he becomes I'm Spider-Man. We see that journey up to that and past that. What does that mean? I think that's really dope. But because we're taking this slow approach, that's when people go, no, no, no. Now, one thing that I really, really, really value, I really value the fact that there's that mirroring image of the kid that is Peter Parker and the kid that is the moviegoer. I do think that fans get caught up in like this ownership of a character, this ownership of a story, and they get caught up in this sometimes where they don't really think, because again, I feel like the fact that they're telling a different story is why people are mad, not because the story is bad. People are mad because this story is different from what they are used to. Like, I don't want to have the same stories reiterated to me a whole bunch of times. I don't need that. Like, on one hand, we know Uncle Ben is very important to the Spider-Man character. We know that. On the other hand, should Uncle Ben be mentioned in the Spider-Man films? Yes. But does he need to be? No. Why? Because we know Uncle Ben is important to the Spider-Man character. Now, I hear the argument, but how do we know Uncle Ben is important to this Spider-Man character? Well, on one hand, we don't. Outside of him carrying a briefcase that had Uncle Ben's his initials on it, meaning he was literally carrying Uncle Ben's baggage. You know, outside of that, we don't. However, we know that the Spider-Man character, Uncle Ben, is very important. And we can on one hand think, well, Tony Stark has replaced the Uncle Ben character. But on the other hand, I think we need to reel it back a little bit and just think about the story. Think about the story that's being told, the context of everything, the story. I think that if we were to think about the story that's being told, instead of comparing it to the story that's in our mind or the story that has already been told, I think there could be a bit of an appreciation or a bit of a understanding of what's currently taking place. I also believe that Uncle Ben's omission is not by accident, and Uncle Ben is going to be revisited. Like, the current Spider-Man like franchise as it stands is within the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but as they continue, it may go somewhere else. It may not be whatever. But like, I find it extremely interesting that in the comics, like, Spider-Man's parents were SHIELD agents, and within like the Marvel Cinematic Universe Spider-Man franchise, there has been like no conversation about not even just his parents, but also his uncle, because his parents, his uncle is like the brother to his dad. So like, I think there's something there. I think there's a larger story that people don't pay attention to because of the fact that this is different. Oh my God. No. Like, even under the context of like Peter Parker not being in the MCU, I think there's a reason for the omission of Uncle Ben outside of the fact that we've already been told that story a whole bunch, 1,000 times. I think there is a significant reason why there's an omission to Uncle Ben. And I do think that could be talked about later on in the franchise. I just don't believe that people are fairly judging like the Spider-Man franchise in the Marvel Cinematic Universe because they're so tied and so emotionally like holding on to these past stories, and that they can't appreciate like current stories, or can't appreciate, just the present. They're so tied to the past and what's familiar and what's comfortable to them. And honestly, like, things will always change. Change is good. Change is necessary. To hold on to these old ideas and these old notions, for me, is kind of not good. That we don't progress. But also, I think that when you keep looking back, you can never look ahead. You can never see what's in front of you. And because what's in front is kind of interesting. Why hasn't Uncle Ben been mentioned? We know Uncle Ben exists. Why hasn't he been mentioned? As a moviegoer, first of all, we're fans, so we speculate all the time. But as a moviegoer, as a fan, you're not even looking at that? You're just so fixated on the past, on what your interpretation of the character is, and what your story is, and what you've read, and what you've been told, that you can't even pay attention to the fact that, this story, that entire thing hasn't even been touched upon yet. I wonder why. He's holding a bag that has Uncle Ben's his initials on it. There's something there. There's some trace there. Why haven't we touched on that? In the comics, Peter's parents are SHIELD agents. And like Uncle Ben's brother is Richard Parker, who is a SHIELD agent. Is there something there? Yes, no, I don't know. But there hasn't even been a acknowledging of that. There's just been this constant, oh my God, Spider-Man is like this, and that's how he is, because that's how he was, and it's just like we need. Listen, change is good. We need to, I think, embrace difference. Embrace the uncomfortable, the difference, and what makes us uncomfortable with that difference in story. Because you never know, it may not be as different as you think. Or it could be leading up to the similarities, It could be leading up to where we want it to get to, where it will be. And I think it's an interesting story that could be told if we're along for the ride, instead of, trying to go back to that last stop. That last stop is gone. It's the last stop. It's the past. We're past it. And if you want to go back to it, you can always go back to it. But you're not going to be able to dictate the future by looking at the past and being in the past. So that's all I have to say about that. Venom 2 Million. Talking about this stuff. Subscribe if you like this video. Like this video if you like this video. And Twitter. I'm on Twitter sometimes. My Instagram is a personal Instagram. I may put it in the description. I don't know if you want it. Ask. I don't know. I'm going to be down there in that comment section below because I want to hear what y'all think. What do y'all think about what I'm talking about the MCU Spider-Man, about just the difference in story? I personally believe that people aren't upset at the fact that the story is bad, but they're upset at the fact that the story is different, which is a little silly to me. Silly. I'm Venom 2 Million. Thanking you for watching. Peace! Did I scare you? Peace, y'all. Have a good one. Peace!